Last night was a pretty tough night for us at Ubuntu. We all knew it was coming, but at 11:37 South Africa time last night, President Jacob Zuma announced to the world that Mandela had passed on. You know, we knew it was coming, but it shook us to our very core. He was the reason why I first went to South Africa in 1994, and he was the reason why I never left. He reminded us every day what it was like to be truly human. He spoke of freedom as an ideal that was worth dying for. So often we throw around words like moral compass. We lost an incredible man, but we shouldn't mourn his death. We really should celebrate the fact that he did live and that we had a chance to know him in our lifetime. And I just need to share a few thoughts before I got on with my talk, because he meant so much to me. So thank you, Madiba, for all you've done, and we'll continue your walk. I'm going to start by asking you a question that I'm asked by donors just about every day. How many kids can I get for $10,000? Let me rephrase that. How many lives do you think I can change for that amount of money? 5,000? 1,000? 100? I think you see where I'm going with this, right? I'm going to tell you it's one, and it doesn't always work. Right? We've all heard it before. $1 a day saves a child. People with clipboards on the streets. Huge multimedia campaigns telling us this. But if all it took was $365 to change a child's life, don't you think we'd be able to take just some of that $50 billion that's invested in aid in Africa every year and uplift 137 million people? Sub-Saharan Africa is the only region in the world where the amount of people living on $1.25 or less has increased over the last 20 years. We now have over 400 people living on $1.25 a day. There's not a conference I go to, a summit I attend, where the same tired strategies aren't being promoted. Philanthropists, policymakers, we all are sitting around debating what's wrong. All anyone can agree upon is that something is indeed wrong. Is it more aid? Is it less aid? Debt forgiveness? You see, we've become so fixated on numbers, on quantifying impact, on seeking higher returns on our investment, that we've forgotten something, that every number, every statistic represents a human being. You see, if we're really going to uplift people and take them out of poverty, we have to completely change our approach. We have to change absolutely everything. See, nobody in this room doesn't really believe that because we're all created equal, we shouldn't all be afforded the same opportunities, right? The problem is that this basic shared worldview has not translated into effective development strategies. This obsession with numbers, it's completely muddied our perspective. When I first arrived down in South Africa in 1994, I was 17 years old. I couldn't understand this disconnect. I didn't know what it was like to live in abject poverty or under a brutal apartheid regime. I was with a delegation of high school students touring the country to observe the transition to democracy. What I did know was that something really special was happening. The South African story was amazing. The world was taking notice. We spent 6 weeks touring the country. The excitement was in the air. It was muted by fear and oppression and apprehension, but you could feel the euphoria. We met with everyone from your Robben Island freedom fighters to your right-wing neo-Nazis. Different views of the past, different perspectives of what's going to happen in the future. But it wasn't an architect of apartheid or a Nobel laureate that changed my life. It was an 85-year-old woman. She was living in a shack in a township called Alexandria. Alexandria is an area of shacks that sits in the shadows of Sandton. Sandton is the economic hub of the continent. It looks a lot like Lower Manhattan. Skyscrapers with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan's, Barclays, fancy cars, but in the shadows is a township. And one evening I met this lady. And we started talking. And she says to me, I waited 30 hours to cast my ballot. And in a way that, with an arrogance that only a 17-year-old could have, I simply looked at her and I said, I don't get it. She was large, she was old, she could barely stand. She smiled at me, patted me on head and said, "No, boy, you don't get it. I've been waiting 85 years." And she walked away. I never saw her again. It was that moment that I realized I wanted to become part of what they were calling the New South Africa. I'll never understand what it's like to have grown up in a shack, to have watched my parents taken from me in the middle of the night by police. But what I witnessed was a country that hung on Mandela's words. We're not going to forget what happened. We're going to forgive and we're going to move forward. A few years later, as a university student here in the United States, I found my way back to South Africa. We'd just gotten internet in our dorm rooms, and I think I was probably the first one to get scammed. I found this job in Cape Town, first one on the internet. And I got convinced this professor to sponsor me to go down there for 6 months. Upon arriving, it was a complete scam. I lasted 12 hours. I got on a train and got out of Cape Town. I didn't know where I was going. About 18 hours into this train ride, I met a guy who convinced me to get off in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. He said, "Come have a beer with me in the townships." I said, "Okay, I'm a white guy, symbolize everything wrong in the country with the color of my skin." But I went with him. Went into a tavern, it was a shack, and it was a scene out of a movie. The music stops and everyone looks. And one man pointed at me and pulled me over. I sat with him and had a few beers, and he said, "Listen, why don't you come work at my school?" I said, "Okay, but I need a place to live." He said, "You move in with my family tonight," and that's what I did. So during these 6 months, and the man you see in this image is the man who invited me, Banks. During the 6 months, what I witnessed was children who really believed in the power of education. That was a ticket out of poverty. But what was disturbing was the amount of money that was being dumped into this region. Organization after organization was coming in, everyone defining success by how many children they reached, how many computers they installed, how many library books they handed out, how many hot meals they distributed. But over the 6 months, I saw these organizations, grant cycles end, I saw them move on, and as organizations flowed through, the people that they were there to help stayed put. So in 1999, I decided to start Ubuntu Education Fund. I wanted to do it because I wanted to do everything different. I had $300 from a university raffle and 8 credit cards. I don't know if you remember back in the day, they used to give credit cards away like candy on campuses. It's dangerous, but I took 8 of them. We want to do everything different. You see, I want to take the most vulnerable children, the kids who've been raped, the kids who had lost their parents, the kids who are HIV positive, and I want to give these children what I believed children all around the world deserve, and that's everything. And then I wanted to stick with them their entire lives because I believed there was absolutely nothing more sustainable than investing in a child every day of their lives. When we started Ubuntu, we didn't really know what we were doing. But unfortunately, like everyone else, we were no better. We became obsessed with one number. Mine was 40,000. Don't ask me why, I was 21. It seemed right at the moment. I believed that if we could hit 40,000 children, we would change the world. I believed funding would come in. I'd be invited to speak at the biggest conferences. And so we decided to start designing programs that were output-oriented. We built 13 computer centers right away. We built 7 libraries. We distributed 1 million condoms. We were excited. And let me tell you something, it was working. Money was coming in. We were getting media attention. And then one day, Banks, the man who invited me to live with him, introduced me to one of his colleagues, an amazing man named Obani Zonke. Obani was running an after-school program, a poetry club for 10 kids. I was instantly enthralled by these children. I started visiting every day. What began as poetry club evolved into homework, taking them to the doctor's appointments, driving them home, making sure they had enough food. And then it clicked. Why was 40,000 such an important number? Sure, we were reaching big numbers, and when I get back to New York and tell everyone what we were doing, everyone pat me on the back, "Oh, you're reaching 40,000 kids, that's great." But what we were doing with these 10 children was truly transformative. These kids' lives were being changed by all of our personal commitment and effort. So the Ubuntu model grew out of this realization that 40,000 was the wrong number. It was the wrong idea. It was the wrong measurement. You see, we have to rehumanize development. We have to do it not because it's the ethically or the right thing to do. We have to do it because it's a smart thing to do. It's the only way. You know, our focus on numbers has oversimplified the complexity of the poverty trap. If you provide a hot meal for a child for lunch, it is wonderful, but it does nothing to alleviate the pervasive food insecurity of that child's home. The Ubuntu model is our answer to all of this. If you think about how each of you got to where you are today, if you close your eyes for a moment, think about the soccer games, the teachers, Think about your grandmother putting her arm around you, making you a hot cup of soup, right? Now look at the person next to you. Completely different experience. What worked for you might not work for the person next to you, might not work for your sibling, your cousin, another child. Now think about a poor community, right? With their problems are equally unique, equally important, but actually they're a lot more complex. A mother having to make a decision, should she feed her children or spend that money buying textbooks for them? We have a young girl who might be struggling with reading comprehension, and the girl sitting next to her might be able to memorize vocabulary, but has major psychosocial problems because they're being abused at home. See, parenting is responsive. It's incredibly individualized. There is no one development theory that can simply be replicated across the world to raise children. There's only an inherently simple idea, and that is every child's needs are different, and they're all just as important. If I've learned anything in 15 years, it's that raising children isn't scalable. And it takes a lot more than a 12-month grant cycle to raise a child. At Ubuntu Education Fund, we function as society's most basic unit, the family. We provide our children everything. We're doing what all of your parents tried to do for you. I tell people it's probably a lot harder for me in life to fail than succeed. We work with these children every day from cradle to career. And our model's working. The Ubuntu Center, which is behind you, is our statement to the world that access to great education and healthcare, it shouldn't be a privilege reserved for those living in Manhattan. It should be a child's right. This building is as nice as anything you'd find here, but it's sitting in the middle of shacks. After 15 years, we can prove our model's working. Our children are matriculating at twice the rate of their peers. Our mothers are adhering to their HIV drug regimens at 97% compared to 50% in the larger region. This is key, because keeping a mother alive is the key to stabilizing a home and ensuring that child in that home makes it. For every dollar we put into our children and they graduate our program, it results in $8.70 in real lifetime earnings. A few weeks ago, back in South Africa, I had the chance to sit with Lwando and Teo, the young man you see behind me. Lwando was one of our original poetry students. He had lost both his parents to HIV and was living in a shack by himself. Today, or actually not today, in a week, he'll be graduating from the University of Cape Town with a degree in geology. This is what success means to me. This is what it's about. It's not about reaching more kids for less money. It's about taking the children you're working with and actually getting them out. So when I share Lwando's story with you, I hope you don't think I'm crazy anymore when I tell you it costs $10,000 a year to take a child in a shack in Africa out of poverty. At Ubuntu Education Fund, we've proven that one's birthplace should not determine their future. By taking 2,000 children in a little corner of Africa and giving them absolutely everything, I believe we're changing everything. Thank you.